Welcome everyone who's coming in to listen to this amazing interview with an awesome person, Steve Joyner. I want to introduce him because I feel like if he gave an introduction for himself, he would sound like he's really talking about himself because this man has quite the accolades, and he isn't a tattoo artist, he's a body piercer, but still within the body art realm, body art industry, and truly an advocate for it. You'll learn more about that here in a little bit. But he's been an APP member for 26 years and a body piercer for 35. He's the former APP board. He's a part of the APP board, a former board member, but also was the vice president at one point. Created and directed the APP's Legislative Regulatory Affairs Committee. He's a member of AFTO. AFTO is if anyone's heard about these interviews before, it's the Association of Food and Drug Officials. He's a part of that body art committee. Also with the Body Art Education Alliance, which is another awesome organization built to help safeguard and educate the government about tattooing and body piercing and all things body art. He's also the co-chair, ex-co-chair. I know we got a new co-chair, Neha.
There's two. There's one from industry and one for regulators. So I am the industry co-chair.
So Steve Joyner is the co-chair for the National Environmental Health Association's Body Art Model Code Committee. And that is something that we'll definitely dig into. We've talked about it in the past a little bit on Launchpad, but this is something we can kind of research and kind of dig into a little bit more. And he's also won some awards. The AID Memorial Award, the APP President's Award, the Arkansas State Recognition Award, Association of Industry Award, APP Recognition of Service Award, NEHA Presidential Citation. You're an instructor, a performer, a body artist, a body piercer, and even an actor. So, like I said, if you were to give yourself that introduction, it would really wouldn't want you to sound full of yourself because that's amazing stuff you've done, Steve. Yeah. And you've been you've done some great things in your career. And sometimes I feel like you'd probably be too humble and you wouldn't want to rattle off all of those accolades, but I think they're worth listening to because it plays into our conversation today. Now, I did kind of give a very, holistic view of your career and what you've done thus far. But would you like to kind of share maybe with those who are listening, your upbringing, where you came from, how you got into the industry? Maybe kind of give us your origin story a little bit.
Yeah. Hello, and thank you very much. Yeah, I am a little bit different. Everybody's got their own story, and I think everybody having a story is just beautiful. And mine's a story. I'm culturally Native American, not just by blood. I was raised Potawatomi and Choctaw. And as, 10, 11 years picking up National Geographic and seeing other people around the world doing some of what we were doing, the curiosity killed the cat. But no, the curiosity made me go out and find out why and how. And I still think I'm 52 years old. I'm still looking for some of the answers, but it's that led me. And this is I've been in industry since '87, so this led me into the local people called New Wavers back then in the '80s, doing piercings and coloring their hair. And I was like, well, hold on, man, my tribe does a septum piercing, but that person's got this cool color neon thing and going on, and why not? It was awesome. But then I started seeing people doing it very, very dirty, and including my tribe. I was using common sense of why aren't we wearing gloves? Like, so, I have mad respect for ritual, but when it comes down to it, a ritual, there's still bacteria. So that led me, I decided I didn't decide. I started piercing people locally in 87 punk rock community and stuff like that. And then I decided I want to do this real and using common sense and taking college courses. And then I decided I want to leave Oklahoma. That's where I grew up. It wasn't for me. I wanted to get out and branch out. And I did a very cliche thing. I joined the military because I was, of that age, and that's how I thought getting out. and it worked, but not necessarily how everybody at that age thinks it'll work. But that took me all over the world. Gratefully got to see body modification done anything from different cultures to different studios. And at the same time, I was watching and admiring, being taught what to do and what not to do, watching other people. And then about the time I decided I had to get out of the military, I live with medical conditions, and I needed to exit. I had also heard about the Association of Professional Piercers. And when I exited, I moved to Los Angeles to get further education and training, if you will, on doing better piercings. And challenges that was around us back then, especially being a male piercer, was very interesting. And I decided, how am I going to change this? This is ridiculous. And growing and growing ended up leading me back to Dallas to open a studio. Now, this is 1995. There's a lot I'm skipping, a lot. Like we don't. I could talk for hours. And with 35 years in industry, you're going to have a little bit of history to speak about.
A little bit.
But I found myself opening a studio with there were 2 piercers and 3 tattoo artists in Dallas. And while I was there, a friend of mine, Genevieve, walks up and hands me, and I'm not exaggerating, a folder this thick, a huge like school folder, but that thick, and was like, I need to give this to you. I'm moving to San Francisco. And I said, what are you handing me? And she's like, oh, this is the regulations we're working on. And I said, oh, and I literally, and I'll be a little bit blunt here, I said, oh, fuck no. And I just left the government. I'm out of no military, no more government, no, I just want to be myself and be an artist. And she said, you're the most articulate one of us around here. And so I metaphorically looked around and said, give me that, and we'll see what we do. And I would tell you, back then, I called a meeting for every artist in the state. So Texas is huge. Everybody knows this. 49 people showed up. I was so let down. All the way up until about 2013, that was the largest turnout of piercers or tattoo artists or anything at one time. So I also learned a lesson about this industry, like they're not like, it's not the military. So I did take that on, and we didn't know what we were doing. It was OJT. What it was really how am I going to let any government, county, state, whatever, this was state level, write regulations for us without talking to our industry. Back in my head, I was like, you don't do my job. And I get that there are portions of this that are already set by standards in other industries, medical field, whatever. But at the end of the day, you're writing regulations about something you don't know. So I did work with the health department. We did all kinds of crazy stuff, because even flush suspension came up in this. We had to suspend somebody in front of the health department. I mean, you guys, it was almost like the Wild Wild West. It's way better now. Then it was like, show us. So I ended up, this was 97-ish, 97. And so to speed it along, 99, we had regulations by this time. They were, in my opinion, they were half-assed, but that's just kind of what you fight for what you're going to get, and you only get a push. Still some of what that today.
Yeah.
you
real quick, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Could I before we, like you said, you're moving your store along, I have a few questions about what's been going on prior to getting to 99, and we'll go back just a tad bit about the military. You said you've been traveling around the world. What branch were you in again, sir?
I was in the Army.
Thank you for your service. And when you were traveling around the world and you were experiencing other body modification, did you do any piercings or anything when you were in there?
Yes, I was a piercer. I am, and I need to, I have written this down. And Paul King, if anybody knows him, is a piercer owner, studio owner, cultural anthropologist, has harassed me for years. But I pierced myself in the Persian Gulf War, but I did it with the local Bedouins. It was, we went on R&R, but it was called a Bedouin fair. Our naming, not theirs. And when I went there, I had heard about the Hafada piercing, and that's the upper left of the testicles. And supposedly this was something that was done in this culture, and Modern Primitives book spoke about it. And today we know a lot of those were made up, but a lot of those were real. I did not know, so I asked them. And to make a longer story short, it took me about 5 hours to get a response before they pulled me aside and showed me that they had it. And then I was asked them if they would do mine. I knew that this was a bad idea, but it was an experience. You're only going to get one time. And what they ended up telling me is, meet me inside this tent over here, and you're going to do yourself. The reason I had to do myself is because they do it when you reach, when you cross the puberty, and they reach when you reach manhood. So, so it's around 12 or 13 years old, and I was older than that, but I was also not of their people. But so I went in. It was like, okay, I'm going to go. Like, I went and talked to the medics. I had a ear stud, the old butterfly clasp that you lock together. Well, the uniform has a pocket and it has a flap underneath it, and I had it in that flap with me so I could check the holes and make sure they were open because I didn't wear jewelry while I was out there. And so I went to the medics. The only thing we had was rubbing alcohol pads, and to wipe this off, and I was going to pierce myself with this dull ass stud, and I was like, am I? I walked in the tent trying to find the hype, some kind of motivation, and when I went in the tent, it wasn't just him, it was 5 of them. And they're all sitting there with big gaps in their teeth, all like in their Bedouin regalia, and I was just so out of place. And then I was like, instead of being intimidated and walking out, I did just the opposite. I said, oh, hey, I got this. Like, I don't give a damn. Because they all stood on their ankles and laughed at me as I did it. I pierced myself. And then we went to war shortly after, and I'm surprised it did not get infected. It didn't. I didn't shower for 2 weeks. So but I ended up stretching it later, still have it today. But that's my off the cuff stuff. Otherwise, yes, I was running around the country and piercing. And right before getting out of the military, I got brought to the office because I got caught. I was working in a studio. This is Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I was working in a studio, and my whole entire chain of command took me to the general to get in trouble because by post regulations, you weren't allowed to go in these places. And not only was I going in there, I was working in there. But that's how I wanted. I wasn't getting art done. I was working. Now, have I been tattooed in there? Of course, I've been tattooed in there. Just like this whole underside and was done in that studio. but I got in trouble, and then they told me, what are you going to do when you get out of the military? Because I was leaving in 2 weeks. And I told them, and so they were actually kind of rude in my opinion, because they said, so everything you know is how to poke holes in people. And it took me a little bit to think that they were talking about bullets and needles. And I didn't like it, but it made me even more motivated because what I was doing, in my opinion, was wrong. I was never a rebel at all. I was, at the time, special operations, but I was a former drill sergeant. I was not a half-ass soldier. I was a 120% soldier. And I was like, no, why can't I be myself and still soldier? So when I got out of there, I was ready to get out of there.
Understandable. Yeah, that's especially being a drill sergeant. That I was in the Air Force, and if it's any inclination of who you are, the way they were back then. I mean, I know it's a different military now, but man, that definitely a lot.
Definitely is. I was at the end of those asshole days.
But it's wild that you're saying that you weren't allowed to go into like tattoo studios and body modification facilities at this point in time, and yet now we interviewed Ryan Harrell just a few weeks ago.
Good deal.
And he has, he's got tattoo shops across. I mean, so far, what 6 or 8 forest tattoo shops in Army and Air Force bases, and he's got like 25 in build out. So now it's like, it's totally accepted. So it's interesting to see that contrast. But you got out of the service, obviously.
Let me skip ahead with one comment, and then I'll bring it back to chronological order. You had read off that I had received, I was a recipient of the AFTO medical device industry. After receiving that, when I come off the stage, the president of NEHAL came over and said, you're going to be at the NEHAL meeting in 2 weeks in Nashville, right? And I was like, yeah, sure. He's like, I got a meeting you need to be part of. I was like, okay, I have no idea. None of us nowadays wants to be surprised with shit, So I walk into this meeting, and it was 3 full-board colonels. And they told me, we're going to be putting tattoo studios and bases in post. So they have no idea who I am. And I'm like, really? And I was like, okay, can we stop and let me be selfish for a minute before we go forward? I said, I'm a former drill sergeant in the Army, and I understand the 670-1 to keep up with it nowadays. You're allowing tattooing on base and post? And they were like, good. And you understand how nasty it is off post and base, and people are going to get it done no matter what. So we need your help to regulate it. And I was like, holy hell, like this has come big full circle. It's like very interesting. And I've been on the phone a lot with Ryan, because I will tell you guys, we can, there was something written, language was written. There's a big difference between disposable and single use. Sure. The body art model code has the wrong word in the wrong place. And the Army was trying to make him use a squeeze bottle and throw it away after every client. So it was a uphill battle. We got
it definitely gets into that, the interpretation issues that can run into that for sure.
Languages,
but yeah, we'll definitely would love to touch on the NEHA stuff here in a little bit. But I just kind of going, like you said, going back to the story of getting out of the service and then piercing out in, you said it was in Texas, right?
I was in Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas. And were you active? Was the APP really active at that point? Were you a part of the organization?
APP took off in 94. I joined in, I will tell you, I submitted an application in 95. There's no secrets here. And they sent me information to go to the Gauntlet Piercing School. And I was like, no, I'm not trying to go to the piercing school. Like I'm down with that too, but I'm trying to join your association. So then I was working for the secretary of the APP, and I let him know. He's like, "Oh hell no, we need you." And so he, I resubmitted, and it took about another year and a half before it got approved. So I've officially been a member since '97. I've been working with APP one capacity or another since 95. But I don't look at that. I look at it as I've been a member since 97. And then I was voted, we had the first, it was a good old boys club before. That's how everything starts out. The first voted in board in 99, and I ran for vice president and was accepted into that role. And one of the things that I realized, because there was already places by this time, I had already worked with like 3 or 4 states. Arkansas had updated stuff. Kansas had updated stuff. I'd already worked with a few states by this time, and I had a black folder of every state, and I had this box that I would carry around of every state's regulations, and then we decided to put that on our website. And how cool! And I created what was called the Legislation Committee. Now it's Legislation Regulatory Affairs Committee, because we couldn't lobby. We the nonprofit that we were tied our hands a little bit, and but I was so proud of this box that we had from Bryce Pheasant, the vice president, that I learned a lesson in about 3 years that it's hard to keep up with. Regulations change so much, and especially links on websites. I shared this with you before in the conversation, but every year they change. I was like, why do you guys keep changing? So it was really hard. So now it's best to know, I see that you're doing this, and I love it. Who is the representative of each state, and let them keep up. That is the way to do it, my friend.
100%. Spread the word.
You learned much faster than I did.
I mean, definitely a huge difference between the 90s and today with technology availability and use of it for sure. And now, the APP had come about just a few years after the APT had come about, the Alliance of Professional Tattooists, and I know that they came about for probably a similar reason, right? There was that transition where tattooing was becoming more regulated, and they needed a liaison between the two. And it sounds like you stepped in the APP in that similar capacity, kind of helping legitimize piercing a little bit more at the time. And it sounds like you've been continually working up through the millennia, and there's so many more elements of organizations you worked with and formed. What part did you start really getting involved with, like some of these governmental committees that you're working with now?
It wasn't until years later. AFTA was the first one to knock on the door, and that was only 8 or 9 years ago. And we had worked with so many. Our wings had spread. We went from 99 till, I would think, until about Well, 2009 is when I said we need a committee, not me. One person should never be in charge of everything. Never. I don't believe in it. What if I die tomorrow? You know, even if you're a badass, it doesn't matter. And it takes a village. It 100% takes a village. And even when I've been recognized with the President's Award and stuff, in my recognition of that, hell, the federal, the after award I got, I even spoke about this goes out to the people allow me to sleep on their couches, to sit in the meetings with me, that help. It takes everybody. It's not, no award is earned by one person. I don't care. Never did it for recognition like that. I did it because I'll tell you why I did it. We need validation of this industry. And I say industry because it's called body art nowadays. I hated that in the beginning because we're different industries. You know, I'm a piercer. I do hand poking, tattooing. I was trained in London, Oslo. You'll never hear me call myself a tattoo artist. You know, I'm scarification, branding. Yes, I do body modification too. But when it comes down to it, the way that everybody, I don't care if it's county, a state, international, they all look at it as your customers and my customers are coming through the same door. And it doesn't matter. It's body art. So inside there, it's like, yeah, we all know that there's only certain rooms where all use the lobby, the restroom, whatever. But, you know, maybe if there's a sterilization room or something nowadays, but it's yeah, it's come a long ways. After John Mysock was the chair at the time, hit me up and said, "Hey, we want you to come to this." I'll tell you, I was a little bit intimidated, and I was like, "I'm not going by myself." And I asked our medical director, Chris Glunt, to go with me so that we at least have two sets of eyes on something. And two sets of ears, you know, like it matters. Mm-hmm. And we walked in the room, and I kind of laughed because something else. I'm in an entertainment field too, and like, you know, when you travel, like somebody's guitar tech, a guitar tech might work 4 or 5 bands. So every show you go to, you get a different backstage group, and you know half of them. You know, just to give you an example. Mm-hmm. Well, I walked in the room and I knew about 7 or 8 people. And I was like, holy hell, like that person used to be a health inspector in Montana, and that one in Colorado Springs, and that one in Texas, and now they're up here working for AFTO and FDA. And so it was interesting. That's when it dawned on me, I've been doing this too long. Like we know each other. But it was eye-opening of what was happening, and I heard them, like the future, how the federal government's going to get involved, how we want the industry part of it, you know. And I'll share with you what I did was I said, okay, we need way more people than me here, and they wanted that. They wanted industry. So what I had done at the time, I had just worked with Jesse Neese, not too far before this. And Jesse's somebody who I've known for years and part of APT, and I told him, I said, hey man, I need you to reach out to some tattoo artists and manufacturers, let's get people in here. And where AFTO was at fault is they really didn't understand this industry. Now I get it that I was kind of I'll call it a liaison between them and us because language is different. You know, all of us own a pirate patch. You don't always have it on, but you keep it on your pocket. You know, and sometimes you need it. Sometimes you're going to be like, I don't give a damn. I'm doing it my way, you know, and it doesn't align with what they want. So to me, what I'm trying to do is get them to respect. They don't have to like, but to respect, we all own pirate patches. And every once in a while, I'm going to put it on. and at the same time, we've earned that because I've been flip your goddamn badge on me to come in and do an inspection and treat me like shit. You can leave. Like, I've been in there. But I also knew kind of what my rights were. My father was a plumbing inspector, so I understood a little bit more of how that world worked. And, you know, to me, it was like, no, this should never be. The communication between regulators and industry got off on the wrong foot. I think it's hell of a lot better today. But when it came to AFTO and what they wanted is they were trying to get ahead of the game. And part of that have to do with what we're dealing with right now with FDA, you know. And I reached out and we started beating the drum and bringing people in. And And not everybody agreed with their take on it. I respect it. I mean, hell, even Mario and Damien showed up and left. And in my opinion, it's because of AFTO was, in my opinion, trying to give them the right answer. No, the answer was, I don't know. So and it took us a little bit to get back straight, and I feel like we got back straight. But it's government, so you're always going to have who the hell's making decisions where. But yeah, it started off in the beginning with John. At the time, he chaired, maybe that's the wrong word, director of FDA Cosmetics. So it was very eye-opening, and I understood how it all worked, and I feel like industry didn't. And I think that we didn't get that learning curve, and it's taken us a few years to catch up on that.
It sounds like it sounds like the AFTO. Now, was this when AFTO was bringing in, obviously, so John Mysock, he was the director of cosmetic regulation for the FDA, and I know he's still actively involved. Even back, it sounds like it was 2008, 2009. I'm sorry, maybe 2009 or 10. They were already starting to pull tattooing.
I think he reached cosmetic. Out in 9, and I feel like that it was like maybe 11 before we actually went to a meeting. Don't quote me on that. I know that my dates are a little skew, but is in that time frame.
Okay, and it already at this point, the FDA is trying to pull tattooing or body art into the realm of cosmetics.
100%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is definitely not a new thing. This is something that's been going on for decades.
No, we went to Burlington 2015 or so, and there AFTO asked FDA, what is the definition of injectable or injection, and is tattooing considered an injection? And they said, let us get back to you. And then after went knocking on the door, and I told them, I use an analogy. I said, don't knock on the door. I said, that door is going to open, and you're expecting green fields and rainbows, and it might be fire and brimstone. So be careful. You let them come back to us with what, and it was 1 year later they came back and said, yeah, injections and cosmetology, or cosmetology, not cosmetology, cosmetics. And I'll tell you, I was, because of the things that FDA said from about 2001 or 2 up until then, I was really against us being in cosmetics because so much more regulatory, so much more cost. I was waving at my friends saying, please stop calling it permanent cosmetics. It's permanent makeup, and stop using this word, because I also, you guys know what an anchor piercing is, or dermal. I had to go to 5 different states and do presentations to prove that they weren't implants, and that we weren't doing surgery to put these in, because they were made illegal in 5 different states. And we got them all flipped. All 5 states are legal now. But language is everything, you guys. It really is. Mm-hmm. And if you're not careful and people don't have definitions of something, it'll bite us. And here we are now. It doesn't matter now. What is done is done.
Yeah, that's you were talking about the word injecting. I know that's something that's written in the language in this current federal bill, which we could talk about here in a minute. But I know that there's kind of a delineation of injecting and inserting, right? For what we do can be considered more of an insertion, as opposed to, when you think of injection, you think of something that's penetrating deeply and then, pumping contents in. But really, we're, at least in the tattoo realm, it's basically, pushing inserting a needle into the dermal layer, and then actually creating a small vacuum where the molecules of pigment are then inserted. So I know there's like that level, like you're right, of identifying the way that we define things, and the way that we define things will also then determine how we can then understand the way that they're regulated and the way that they move forward. So I know that's a hot topic, especially with that particular definition, and it should be something that, for at least the tattoo artists, I believe, as we move forward, try to delineate the two. Because we don't want to be considered something injected. We want to be considered something more of inserted. And it would seem like, that's just a little definition change, and that's an interpretation. Interpretation can make a break something, and the way that something's guided. Now, I don't want to get too far, because
we're bouncing.
Oh no, that's cool. That's cool. I like that you mentioned suspensions and such, and coming that you have that like a Native American background, and that's obviously where that kind of just kind of originated, I believe. That was something
Many
that you.
cultures over the world it originated. Now, if you're here in North America, yes, it wasn't my tribes. My tribes do flesh offerings, a little bit different. We don't fly off the ground at all from anything. But it was part of me getting into this also. Honestly, the first suspensions I ever saw were Africans swinging, and India, and both,
Wow.
not people over here. I didn't get that, even though when I was a young person, I don't know, I would have to say around 12 or 13 that I watched A Man Called Horse, and I had seen it already, Richard Harrison film. So to me, it was like something I knew growing up, but it wasn't a big thing. And then the aha moment, everything was like, oh man, about 16, 17, I was like, holy shit, the Sioux do this, the Mandans do this. I already know about this. So, but yeah, many cultures over this world have done some form of suspension.
And I mean, you were doing this to the point where you were able to kind of even educate inspectors about this as well, right? I mean,
Yes.
You mentioned you had to can demonstrate it for them. I mean, I love stories. What kind of experience was that, having a health inspector going like, okay, I was doing suspension?
It was bad. So we pull it off well. I will tell you guys the story, and I don't think I've actually shared this outside of the circles of people in the suspension community. But one of the health inspectors from Austin said, we need to see this. And I actually argued, we're not doing this in the studios. This is after hour recreational stuff, and people aren't coming in the door and paying for this. But they wanted to see it. So myself and Chris Eller and Ron Garza all got together. And I remember for some reason I was a little bit late showing up to where we were going to do the suspension in Chris's backyard. And they had rigged up painter truss on wheels to hang somebody, suspend in the middle of that, and then push it over a swimming pool. No. Swimming pools are also regulated by health department. And if you're going to drip blood in that water, that is a no-no. And I was like, what are we doing? The health department guys were like, no, this is kind of cool, man. Like, let's do what you're going to do. It's cool today. Tomorrow we're going to get something in writing against it, Yep. But I have to give it to my friends. And I will just say ego played in a part that evening. And we did not drop blood in the pool. And I just thought to this day, it was stupid. Like, I was a step ahead of everybody. And they were like, who cares? Because their attitudes, they're going to do it no matter health department saying it's okay or not. And I understand. But some of us put it on stage. And I was part of a performance group, stress discipline. And so you're contracted on stage as a business. So it's which years later I ended up creating Constructs Rich Revolution Core, and have been in some very, very, very prestigious venues in this world. And it's not just about entertainment, it's about education also. And those of you who know Fakir and I kind of butted heads for years, and then we did a collaborative show, and he got it. Fakir unfortunately left us a few years ago, but that was in the suspension realm, that was a to-do. He was raised around Mandans, the people who actually did it traditionally, and saw it in 30s and 40s, and and here I am being native, trying to do what people on stage are doing. So we come from two different viewpoints and the line, but then also, let me spin this on it. People keep trying to put it in regulation. And I'm like, I have a personal opinion. I do not believe in regulating your personal opinion at all. You bring your research. And half of suspension is piercing, the other half is rigging. That's a totally different industry. You don't want rigging regulations in your studio. But anyway.
I have here in New Mexico, Albuquerque, there's a body piercer, Steve Truitt, and he does a lot of suspension. And also I've known Steve for years, and I've only been to 2 suspension shows, and one was a charity event at a local club, and it's very jostling the first time you see it, because I had no idea what to expect. And they started off with putting hooks in two guys' backs, and it connected with chains, and they full sprint away from each other and then stop from the chains and just drop to the ground. And there's a guy standing next to me. He just fell right out.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, they're up in the air, flying around, and it's the sympathetic nervous system gets involved with it, and you just it's an interesting situation. But that's really cool. You were really into it, and kind of probably helped it become, like you said, better monitored, better regulated, or regulations that make sense for it. Because I know Steve talked about how he traveled around with Jane's Addiction, right? Putting on shows around the world. That's awesome. That you could do that safely, and people could enjoy that, but also that it's comes from this kind of really cool ancient practice. So I just know that you had mentioned that in your information. I want to kind of bring that to light, because I thought that was really cool.
I wrote I co-wrote, there was many of us, the first training manual on suspension. It's way out of date now, but I took that knowledge for the military. We need a training manual. This is the gear. This is how you use it. This is. We did that, and it took about 7 or 8 or 9 of us. I would say that even 3 or 4 of us are not even in the industry anymore. I had it professionally edited, all kinds of stuff. It's called The Art of Suspension, and it was taught. We used it in classes and to teach the basic suspension. And I got my door knocked on last year, or during the lockdown, so a couple years ago, about, hey man, we should update that. I was like, whoa, it's way overdue. It needs to be updated. But yeah, it's interesting.
Nice, very cool. Like I said, I want to bring note to that, because that was a very interesting aspect of something you brought to your industry and were involved with. And again, you kind of spent probably a good chunk of that decade before you got involved with AFTO and realized that the FDA wanted to start categorizing as body art in the cosmetic realm, and then obviously very involved with that. And at what point did you get involved with the National Environmental Health Association? So
being part of AFTO for a little bit, and then I got an email saying, hey, we need to talk about body art, and we have the body art model code that actually the original was created in 98, came out in 99. A lot of my friends and colleagues, and some of these people are not even with us anymore. I mean, it's been a while, and they had released it in 99. And if you looked at it today, you'd be like, oh, what in the hell? In fact, when I looked at it, I was like, man, no, these standards went away in like 96. Well, that's because they were starting to write it in 97, 98. It didn't come out until 99. Like, it made sense, but they wanted to update that. And I was like, first I was like, let me give you a round of applause, because 20 years later, we're finally going to do something. What the body art model code actually is it's a model code that gets handed down to states. And then it's up to them if they want to adopt it, if they want to cut and paste from it, or if they want to throw it in file 13. It's up to them to do what they want to with it. And I have actually, since that one came out, I've worked with 3 different states that have used it in one fashion or another. One of them, I would tell you, Montana is just talking about adopting the damn thing, which is really interesting to me, because how does it fit to your government? Something that I don't know if the viewers know or not, but even on it's obvious that states work differently, but I mean drastically different. Like Nebraska, Senate and House work together. There is no go to separate chambers, stuff like that. So is it faster? Yes. But also, to me, it's a little bit riskier. That's my personal opinion, which I will, if I'm ever going to give you my opinion, I will voice that first, because I like to come with research and facts. But it's, it's that model code, my opinion, even being on it, was kind of rushed through. We missed some editing. Nothing that serious, but when you're talking about disposable versus single use, it matters.
Sure.
You're writing regulation. We talked about it earlier. That wasn't a state being confused. That was the entire military.
And that kind of brings up a topic that was kind of parallel with something that came up in Ryan's interview and conversations with them. because you just nailed it. I mean, that was one of the reasons why you went and started creating your black box of all the different regulations, to try and have some communications with different states. That's the purpose of why we created the body art body art regulation support system, which is a place for all of the different states' regulations to live, because it's so difficult to get licensed in different places if you're traveling, either guest spots or doing convention or
reciprocity is a cuss word to me. It's
I understand that because I spent a better part of a decade working with New Mexico state regulations, and licensing people from other places was just like banging your head on the wall. And when Ryan was trying to build these studios in these different military bases in different states, you had mentioned earlier just that the military was like, what do you mean there's no consistent regulations? What do you mean this state doesn't have any, or they're required us to bloodborne pathogens? The one thing that Ryan had mentioned and potentially alluded to is that because it's inconsistent so much throughout the country, that there's been potential that we would want to utilize this body art model code for a federal regulation and actually apply it to the entire country, so we have some cohesiveness. Now, in your experience, do you feel like that's a potential? Has there been any talks about that? Or is this just something that's more in the military realm?
Potential, yes. And I think that we would need to not lose control of it. So if you look at things like plumbing, heat and air, other codes, they have a national code, and then it breaks down to a state. Some, it's just like our regulation, it would break down to a city or a county. So to me, if we did that, and I, even we're guilty. Sometimes we get off on a little tangent, I call it, or taking the path out to the left field. And I'm like, no. You're talking state level. Federal needs to be more broad. But we just had a debate the other day about waste management. What you do in Florida versus what you do, and I can name 6 other states, is all going to be different. Does it fall under OSHA? Does it fall under? Of course, but then you get to your local level. So if we had a national code that was, okay, I'm going to use this language, I don't like this language, a minimum standard, then I could be for that. But it would be minimum. This is something that we have to steer all the time. I don't write best practices, don't write minimum, write a standard. What is the standard? No other industry is saying, well, this over here is the minimum and that over there is best practice. No, that's what comes to the table to write a regulation. And then let me make this clear, not a law. So you have laws are the statute, like the things that you can be bit with a fine for a felony or a misdemeanor. But that law tells us we have to have a regulation, right? So then you write the regulations, they can be changed from year to year. Hey, we need to evolve this. What's it take to change a law? Sometimes 2 years, sometimes 4, depends on where you are, before you can touch it again. So it's understanding how government works and and I'm guilty, I will own it. We put a lot into law in the late 90s and early 2000s. And gratefully, knock on whatever wood I can find, we've had the opportunity to go clean that up. So a lot of stuff that you're like, why did that get pulled out of our law for a reason? Because we're your friend and we screwed up the first time. That's why. Because we didn't need jury standards. You got to use this grade in a law, and then 2 years later there's a better grade, but we can't use it because the law says we have to use that. So it being able to write the regulation, if it's a very minimum on a national level, I do think that it's a good thing. But I also think, and we have let you guys know, Neha, after all this, there's probably, I'm making it up, there's a good 15 to 18 industry people there. It's not just piercers. It's not just tattoo artists. It's not just manufacturers. It's not body modification. It's all of us. Permanent cosmetic. It's every single person. I've worked with CP for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I've worked with APT for that long. It's like can't tell you how many states that I've sat down that there were no tattoo artists that all of a sudden I'm writing your regulations. I don't want you writing mine. Please come work with me.
But think that's a perfect kind of segue into, because, like you were just saying, the body art model code, which is trying to base just some general standards, could potentially be federal law, right? Which is the scaffolding or the structure from which states and municipalities would create rules from. But it's so important that during the formation of the law or the rules, that we have representation there. Anyway, all the different body art disciplines need to be representing our industry there. That way we make sure that those laws and rules are written in such a way that makes sense for our industry. And that is why it's so important to be involved. And, I feel like as we're kind of sharing with those who are listening about these organizations, they're like, really? Well, that's been around for 20 years. They've been trying to make body art a cosmetic since 2000, like, wow. And it's important for people to be aware, and also to start paying attention, to start being active, because, just as we've alluded to, just, a little bit here and there, there's been a new law, the Modernization of Cosmetic Regulation Act, which is now formally saying all body art is now a cosmetic. And we're at that phase right now where we have, that phase where the scaffolding's there, the structure's been erected. Now they're going to start going, well, how are we going to make these rules, and how are we going to make these regulations? And so it's so important that we, as an entire industry, tattoo artists, body piercers, permanent cosmetic practitioners, all manufacturers, come together and be really involved with the formation of these rules and regulations. And we can't just sit by and go like, someone else will do it. Steve Joyner guy, he's on the board. He'll do it all for us. It's going to be so important that those who are listening, or those who are aware, to be proactive, to share this information, and to support organizations like the APP, support the APT, right? Support those who are working with AFDO and NEHA, right? And it has never been more apparent, right? And you could attest to it, right, Steve? Like you said, something may happen to you tomorrow. Something may happen to the few who are involved, and then we don't have any more representation, and then our future is up to others that could potentially look across the pond and look at what's going on over in Europe, right? Which we don't want none of that, right? So, here's a good opportunity for you, Steve, if you wanted to kind of say to those who would watch this, how important it is for us as an industry, as the collective body art industry. Because you're right, the government doesn't see tattoo artists and body piercers; they just see body artists. How important it is for you to tell them that we need to unite and work together, so that we can write our destinies. Mm-hmm.
I would say my experience, the thing that I've learned, and I'll elaborate a little bit. Strength in numbers. I will elaborate this. When I come to your state to help you write state regulations, I represent, at the time, quite often I was representing APP. I'm still a member. I'm not on the board or committee anymore. I have my own company called Body Art Compliance. And if you went to bodyartcompliance.com, you're not going to see anything, because we created it during the lockdown, and we've been extremely busy, and we haven't even created a website because we are busy helping everybody. And so we got email addresses. So I laugh, and I'm like, okay, this is good, but I need help. And we got help. We got somebody that's going to help create our website with us, and going to help instruct. So somebody to be part of us. Nonetheless, when I come to you, one of the first things I'm going to tell you is you're the taxpayer here, not me. And they're going to listen to you. They're going to listen to me, but you hold more water than I do in certain regards. What I'm going to do is metaphorically hold your hand and help steer you, so that when you say, and I say shall, or vice versa, because language is everything, I'm going to help you, and I'm not there to tell you how to do stuff. I almost got in a fist fight in Arkansas with a tattooer because he thought I was bringing that California shit there. No. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I hunt the mountains growing up, and I'm just as part of your people as you are. And B, I'm never ever going to tell you how to do your job. What I'm trying to do is help you make money, put food on the table, take care of your customers' health, and yours. So you're not taking those cooties home to your children. It's like, it's all the way around. That's it. It's public health and doing business right. I'm not going to try to overregulate you. It's just the opposite. Just opposite. And if I wanted to be arrogant, you should see what you guys would have if we weren't involved with half of the regulations that are out there. It starts out ugly. So to me, when we get in there, it's not just me. Never. I'm knocking on doors left and right. I have been told by APT members, you got this. You can talk. Thank you. I'm not a tattoo artist. Please. I already said this earlier. I want you at the table with me because it takes a team. But you take that same analogy of being a taxpayer in a state and you look at a government level, they're going to listen to the people who are creating the inks, the manufacturers. And they want to listen. FDA has already told us, I told you before, Ben, I got this on videotape. FDA has already told us we want to hear what AFTO's got to say. They want guidance. And to me, I was like waving a flag. Hey, guys, there's a platform. Use the platform. Use the platform. Mm-hmm. They want to listen to the platform. But that also means you got to sit at the same table and come together. And where do I play a part in it? I don't make inks. I do work for Neometal and I work for BAA, which means I'm in the same umbrella as World Famous, but I don't do anything with World Famous. I don't make inks. So I make body jewelry, So to me, it's like, do we sit down with the Nexus crew and, everybody. To me, Mario knows we're friends. It takes all of us to work together. And the reason why is because when we all get up at that table, I'm going to use that loosely, before them. And many of us have been before them, it's like, I know Mario's been there, Sean Brown, they all been up to the federal side of this stuff. But this isn't federal government and Congress. This is FDA. So to me, we all need to work together. And if we're all saying the same thing, and we're all putting the money in the same research, it's all about research and proven. And all of us, FDA is set in the EU, they set in the UK. I don't know. We deal with Australia too. I don't know if they were there. I assume they were. But they know what's going on. So to me, it's not about, their job is not to take things away. Their job is to make it safe. You and I can create snake oil today and put it on a shelf of a store to sell tomorrow. It's not a problem until it is, right? That's kind of where all this has been. And they're going to try to tell us where the problems are. And it's up for us to have proof, like what kind of testing and stuff like that. But it's unified. It's all 100% unified.
Yeah, I love it. Like you said, they want to listen. They're giving our industry a platform.
They've already said that, and
we need to take advantage of it and not be scared of it or think that something's wrong with it. But it actually is just how we, as most industries, legitimize itself, is to make itself unified and through the power of numbers, be able to share what we believe is proper and give the proper science and guidance for those that are looking to ultimately create the rules and regulations for us.
They want to keep heavy metals out of. Come on, do you want to go get tattooed with something that makes you lose an arm or life? No, you don't. I mean, come on. I'm wearing tattoos from the 80s, so I'm sure they've got wasn't the cleanest, but I survived. But yeah, they're asking for our help.
And I'll say this, and I think we're hitting the top of that hour, so we'll kind of wrap up with from, even though I'm a professional tattoo artist, I extend a grateful hand for you spend the last over 3 decades being within our industries and being a champion for our industries, stepping up when no one else would. Sometimes with great power comes great responsibility, and because you could articulate yourself and it made sense to you and you understood it, you still stood up and you still went to bat for us, even though people, as we all know, don't always appreciate it or don't always show favor to it, but you still stepped up, you still woke up, you still put your shoes on, went into those rooms and sat at those tables and had those conversations, and 100% agree that we would be way worse off if you hadn't gotten involved. So I want to say thank you for your service in the industry, and thank you for everything you've done for us thus far, and continue to do. And also appreciate you coming and sitting down and spending some time with us, and giving some information to this platform. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you very much. And it seems like we're still on the path. We just changed directions a little bit, and what that means is the door is open on the bus, you guys. We need more people to get on. Come on, help us. I'm telling you, it takes a village, you guys, and experience. We got that to share, but what's ahead of us? I can make predictions about that bumpy road, but I don't think it's as bumpy as we think it is.
Good. And let's come together and make sure to. Well, thank you so
guys
much,
very
Steve.
much. Appreciate it.
Again, appreciate you. And we'll see you at the next, NEHA meeting.
Yes. See you at the next NEHA meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.